ir 4, bet es domāju, mēs varam, mēs varbūt lēnām sāksim, un tad jau gan jau, ka vēl cilvēki arī paspēs pievienoties. Tā kā šodien mums ir pēdējā lekcija mūsu lekciju ciklā. Man šķiet, mēs tiekamies 9. reizi, ja nekļūdos, ja? Kurš skaita. Tā kā prieks redzēt jau pazīstamas sejas. Šķiet, ka jau esam tiešām iepazinuši jūs par šīm 3-4 nedēļām. Un no tehniskās puses, tad tā kā es pagājušajā skaidroju, tad certifikātu saņems visi, kas ir apmeklējuši vismaz 5 nodarbības, un par šīm nodarbībām arī iesūtījuši savus apkopojumus. Un tad to mēs zināsim, un jūs informāciju saņemsiet visdrīzāk ceturtdien. Tā kā mēs rīt apkoposim visu informāciju, un tad jau ceturtdien arī jūs saņemsiet savus certifikātus. Un tāpat mēs pēc tam arī informēsim par to, kuri tad ir labākie, kas saņems arī galveno balvu mācību maksas atlaidi šeit pie mums RBS. Pirmajam gadam, jā.
Tā kā priecīgā lieldienas arī, ne?
Jā, priecīgā.
Pirmā dienā, ka mēs jūs redzam pēc lieldienām, un arī paldies, ka jūs mums pavadījāt šajās 9 nedēļās. Es redzēju, tur es bija ļoti aktīvs visu laiku, un mēs tagad izanalizēsim jūsu prezentācijas, un arī jums šodien ir pēdējais lektors, jums būs atkal iespējas kaut ko pajautāt, kaut ko komentēt, droši dariet, mēs arī sekojam līdzi to, tāpēc, ka tas ir daļa no novērtējuma. Ja?
Jā, daļa no mācību procesa un tādēļ arī daļa no novērtējuma.
Un es ceru, ka kāda no jūsu komanda arī uzvarēs Junior Achievement. Es domāju, ka viņi pasinos, kas notiks tālāk ar finālu un tā tālāk. Un mēs noteikti turpināsim sadarboties ar to komandu, kā uzvarēs Latvijas finālu. Ja?
Jā.
Tā varam presentēt.
Jā, šodien mums ir runātāji no mūsu un Junior Achievement partneriem no fakultātes, Veronika, kura stāstīs par komunikāciju. Tā kā jūs jau dzirdējāt mazliet par komunikāciju no Ievas, bet tas bija cits aspekts. Tā vairāk bija komunikācija par zīmolu. Tā kā šodien Veronika ļaus mums paskatīties uz šo tematu no mazliet cita aspekta, bet tuvāk jau par to arī pastāstīs Veronika pati.
Labi, lai veicas. Mēs.
Hey, thank you. Can you guys hear me well? Cool. I see a thumbs up. That's perfect. Thank you. Let me just share my screen. It's been a while since I've done this on Zoom. Let me just set it up. And let's go from the beginning. There we go. Cool. Is everyone able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. It's great to be here. It was in Latvian, but of course, I hope there are only good things said over there. My name is Veronika. I work at an American software company, Faxit Latvia, here in Riga. And Faxit has global offices pretty much on every continent, except for Antarctica, pretty much. And just in our Riga office, we currently have about 36 different nationalities, I believe. My main responsibility at Faxit is training and knowledge management, which, as you can imagine, can be very difficult with so many different, nationalities and cultures. I've already encountered many, Asian people when training who would be extremely quiet and detail-oriented, and they would do always everything is asked. On the other hand, they would always be so quiet, they would never ask me any questions. And then I would have Spanish or Croatian guys who, on the other hand, would always ask so many questions that there would be no time literally to, do any exercises with them. So this is just, one example of what I'm going to talk today and what you may need to deal on daily basis at some point, given how global and international the business environment is turning. Okay. So just to give you an idea, I was born and raised in Slovakia until I was 18 years old. Then I went to study to United Kingdom and Germany, where I eventually met my partner, who is from Russia. Nowadays, we obviously live in Latvia, where I work for a US-based company. My boss is from Turkey. However, most of my time, every day, is spent on talking to people from India or Philippines. So this is what I would like to call just my, daily dose of cultures. And what I would like to do in today's talk, just to speak a little about the differences in all of these cultures, how does it affect my daily communication, and maybe also give you some theory about this, as well as perhaps some practical tips that I have developed over time. All right. So let us start off. So the very first thing, I've already used this word a few times today. So what exactly is culture? So when I will be using the word culture today, I will be referring to a system of behaviors that helps us act in an accepted or familiar way. Okay, so just these two words that I would like you to remember: accepted and familiar. Okay, so there might be many different things that are interpreted as accepted or familiar by one person, but completely different by someone else. So, as an example, I know this will be very common. The first thing that comes to your mind when you see this, hopefully or most likely, will be queuing. So this is how people would queue in Britain, everyone extremely polite, always exactly in a row. No one will be cutting through in front of someone unless, you're having a heart attack or you're obviously a foreigner. This will be how it will be looking in France, however. When people are queuing for the Eiffel Tower already, you see something less coordinated, maybe a little bit of a snake. This is what you would see in Finland. So you saw that the Finnish people had the COVID right all along, with the proper 2 meters distancing. Or this is how you would see that people would queue in India. Okay, so again, this is just to demonstrate that what is accepted and familiar for one person may be completely different from someone else. It may be strange, it may be weird, it may be even straight out rude or impolite to someone else. Okay, so this is pretty much what I would like to talk about now. Okay, so before I move forward, what I would like to do is maybe a little test or an experiment now. So what I'm going to show you next, I'm going to give you a piece of text which describes a person, and your task will be to guess who this person is, or more specifically, which nationality or culture it is, okay? Let me just see if I can get the chat box on, because I think that might be the best way to see that chat. Okay, or maybe if you have your microphones, I would appreciate if you could speak up, because I really cannot really see the chat option here, as it seems. Okay, just if possible, please speak up, okay? So let me...
Do you need some help?
Yeah, would you know how I'm able to see the chat during presentation? I think you can see my screen. I thought there should be like an extra box for the chat, right? Maybe I'm missing something.
You should be able to see it in the bottom of the screen. You don't?
I don't see anything.
If you go to the top where you see the share screen.
Yeah. More. record, leave.
Okay, I will ask my staff, okay, that they are more familiar.
Okay, no problem. Or I will just ask people to speak up. I think we can solve it. Thank you. All right, so let me continue. Okay, so here we have it. Let me hide this. So I'm going to give you like 20 seconds or something. So the person, if you were to use a color to describe this person, he would have to be green. He lives in isolation in his home, a place he best describes as his and cozy. However, he's not the most receptive of people when it comes to visitors. He's somewhat primitive, but he's honest, straightforward, and all he really wants in life are the simple little pleasures like peace and quiet. Okay, so I'm just going to give you about like 20 seconds, just really the first guess on the nationality that comes to your mind would do. Oh, and I can see the chat. Perfect. Thank you so much, guys. No. Okay, I messed up this one, right? Thank you, artist. Okay, so I'm just going to, thank you, Romola. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to perhaps tell you the results of this little experiment in other places where the outcome was not spoiled. So the original lecturer who was using this, he lives in Norway. He was asking this pretty much Norwegian people, and they all agreed that this is a pretty good description of a Norwegian person. However, as I've already, given you the spoiler, this is actually the exact depiction from a Hollywood article about Shrek. So what does this show? So the reason I brought this up was because people usually see what they are used to. They usually see what they expect to see. So they will usually guess anything that is accepted and familiar to them. So for example, in Norway, obviously, whatever firstly comes to mind is that Norwegian people are, down to earth. They like the nature. So obviously what you're reading fits you quite well. I'm pretty sure that no one in Norway would be guessing, Latvian or something else. Definitely no one has ever guessed Shrek before. So this is, again, just to demonstrate what does it mean if something is accepted and familiar. Okay, so, all right. Enough for the introduction, I think. So I would like to throw in a little bit of theory also. So, you take away slightly more from this than just a spoiler Shrek picture. Okay, let me hide this. Okay, hope should be all good. Okay, so over the past like 20, 30, 40 years, there has been quite a lot of research done into international communication and how different cultures work out, how do they affect each other, what are, the best common practices. And basically the most common one, without boring you too much, is the one that has emerged in late 70s by Mr. Bell, but I'm going to go through this one in the next slide. Before I move on, I would like you to just have a guess of what countries or what nationalities do you think these pictures depict? And I'm pretty sure there is no spoiler in the next slide, so I think this one should be easier for you. Let me see if I can see the chat now. There we go. Okay. So just any guesses, what are the countries on the blue side or on the left side? And what are the countries on the red? Not quite northern, southern, but I think you're on the right track. So imagine the blue side is the always punctual, rule-based, and the red one is not so much, Yeah, good one, Romulo. So the red one could be about South America. I can imagine you also are quite, loud. You like to dance. What other thing do we have? People who don't really, like to queue. Germany and Spain also fits. So I'm assuming left is German. Yep. Right is somewhere in Asia. Yep. Very good. Okay. I'm not sure about Nigeria. Armands, but pretty much you're all on the right track. So, and someone said it exactly. So the original meaning of these icons or of these pictures was to depict the differences between the Western and the Eastern culture. However, you've also said the correct countries at some point. So who is a good representation of the Western culture? Obviously, Germany was there, Scandinavia, the Americas, even Latvia can be considered as a Western culture. Well, on the right side, you would have the Eastern culture. However, this doesn't mean just Asia. Also, Spain, Italy would come here, obviously, South America, and so on. So just to put this into a little bit more context, just so you can take away a bit more from this, is in theoretical term, this blue versus red is referring to high context versus low context cultures, okay? And the word context refers to the information that needs to surround an event so that the meaning is conveyed, okay? So what does it mean? In high context cultures, so we're talking about the East culture now, right? Or Italy, Spain, China, Japan. So in these cultures, people will often rely mostly on nonverbal clues. So they may sometimes convey the meaning just by not saying something, or they may do it just by the matter of how it's said rather than what is said. Or maybe because something is not spoken, that is also on its own an important clue, okay? So this is all about the nonverbal clues being perhaps more important than the message itself. While the Western cultures will be usually the efficient ones, straight to the point, so these will be the ones that rely more on the actual words, whether spoken or written, right? Now, before I move further, of course, I want to say that none of these is necessarily better than the other. None of them is superior. At least I don't think so. The important thing is only to be able to recognize this and to be aware of this, because only then you can get the best out of any situation. I'm going to go through the tips a bit later, but for now, I just want to focus on these differences. Okay. The next one, which I find quite, I would say, interesting, or the most important one, is in disagreements. So you might have already experienced this yourself, is that the high context cultures, or mostly Asian cultures, let's put it that way, they find disagreements almost personally threatening. So they really would be often afraid to speak up. They would be maybe reluctant to disagree with you, or at least in public. Now, this is not to say that people in the West like conflicts. That's not true, but you've probably also experienced that Latvians do not mind complaining, right? And complaining is also a way of disagreeing, of speaking up, right? So this is something that is very different, again, the Western versus Eastern cultures. And if I also draw from some experience, I would say half of my time nowadays evolves around talking to my colleagues in the Philippines. Now, the Philippines is a country located in Asia, very high context culture, very Eastern. You can think of it similar to, China and Japan. And the Filipino are wonderful people. They're some of the most positive people I know. They'll be always smiling, no matter how serious the topic is. They will be giggling, laughing. They just fill you with energy, if you talk to them. They will always do exactly what you ask, always deliver, and they will never say no to you. However, they will never say no to you. So you see, this can have both positive and negative aspects. So only because they will never say no to you, so to say, it's quite hard to be challenged when you're communicating with them in the long term, unless you know how to approach them in a specific way. They will be more just following your orders rather than having, you know, there and back cycling conversation. So this is also something that you need to be aware of. Some of the other examples where the cultures differ a lot would be, of course, as you know, in the physical space. You must have seen many memes about this, obviously. You know, in Asian countries, there's way too many people, not enough space. So obviously the communal space is different in East, while in the Western culture, it's privacy that is valued much more. I also have a nice experience that always comes to my mind with this. I think this friend is also on the call now. I have a friend from Thailand who now lives in Latvia, and almost every time when someone asks her, what does she like about Latvia or why did she come here, the first thing she will say is the space. Because, you know, comparing to Thailand, where you have so many people, it's so busy, it's so hectic, Latvia is pretty much beautiful, you can say, in the space, openness and nothingness. I don't want this to sound bad, that's just what it is. So people value very different things in these different cultures. Okay. Now, obviously, there are some other items, speed versus accuracy. So you will probably know that in the West, people will often value efficiency, right? So we can say speed. This is not to say that people in the East are slow, but they are more about working at the right time, about having harmony, you know, feng shui of things, and so on. Okay, so now I don't want you to obviously focus only on these differences and how everyone is, you know, different and it's impossible to work with each other. That's not true. Just what I would like you to take away from this is that you always need to be aware of this and need to know how to approach a person, perhaps based on their background or based on how different based on how different a person is. Okay, so some of the tips some of these come from, you know, my experience, some just from what I was able to find online also. So the first very good one, very simple and straightforward, you should always avoid misunderstandings and always be clear, both before, during, and also after business meetings. I know this sounds extremely simple, but it's something that cannot be, you know, stressed too much. So always before any meeting, any important projects, it's always very important to clearly define an agenda. So not only give, you know, a header or a subject line to why you're meeting, it's always a good thing to, you know, maybe add additional information. Perhaps, you know, say that, I don't know, you, Mark, you'll be expected to speak about this, you'll be expected to speak about this. So if possible, you can already even, you know, define some roles before the meeting even happens. This will also help out in a way that the people will not, you know, just come to the meeting in a way that they will just dial in and sit and listen. If people are expected to speak, they will always prepare better. Now the next one, this is probably one of the most helpful and underestimated tips I've ever gotten, was from my manager. This was during the meetings. What I find, especially if you are dealing with projects or meetings with people from different backgrounds. Now, whether you're having a virtual conversation or even in the same room, it's extremely useful just to look at the same screen and write down meeting notes as you go. Now, why is this useful? Not only this makes sure that everyone understands and hears everything correctly, this also prevents any misunderstandings, either from the accent or because, the internet connection was cutting off, so I wasn't sure and I didn't quite catch it. This pretty much, I would say, establishes a protocol that forces you to think and understand things clearly. I know that in the beginning it's quite difficult, especially for me. It was quite difficult to, talk as well as write down meeting notes. It can take some practice to develop, but this is something which I still find extremely useful. And if there is something that you're not able to write down in a short time because you're not able to express it, well, that probably means that something wasn't said clear enough, right? So this on its own also forces you to maybe ask, excuse me, did you mean this or did you mean this? So this always helps people to focus on the same thing and also makes sure that everyone is always, on the same page. So this would be during the meetings and obviously after the meetings. It's very understated, but please always, after every important session, project, anything, please always do follow up with a little summary of what was done, because it's very easy, to misunderstand something. There have been so many times when by the end of the meeting, I was sure that everything was set and clear and defined, only, to find out one day after the deadline that something was completely misunderstood. For example, we have this wonderful colleague from Asia. She's extremely knowledgeable. She's been at the company for, I think, 10 years now. And every time we have a problem, we would turn to her because there are just some things we don't know yet. However, the way she answers, she always answers in such a complicated and vague way that may not exactly answer the question. I mean, I swear she should be a politician. But what I'm trying to say, it sometimes even takes 2 or 3 people to read between the lines to understand what she's trying to say. Now, her English is really good. It's nothing to do with the English. This is just to say that some people will always think differently. So to her, probably my question A or B sounds too simplistic, and she may think, that I'm simplifying matters too much. And this is why she's explaining such a, complicated, vague way. I cannot really speak of the reason, but this only brings it again to the front, the fact that the two of us have very different cultures. We think in two very different ways. And unless you actually are forced, to put it down in your own way, write down certain summary and send it over to everyone, you can never be sure that, you actually agreed on something. So this is, I would say, some of my first tips that I can give you. So always try to write down notes and share everything with everyone. Some of the other good practices, maybe always try to adjust to your audience. I know, again, this is a very, you can say, straightforward rule, where it's something that people often forget. So obviously, there might be times when you are speaking to someone whose English is perhaps not as good, right? So you may want to slow down how you speak. You may want to use simpler phrases. Of course, it doesn't only refer to English. If I speak German, people need to speak to me the same way. Now, specifically with high context cultures, okay, so like I've mentioned to you before, my colleagues from Asia or Filipinos. So I've already mentioned that they very much dislike conflicts. They like to avoid disagreements if possible. However, if you still want to work with them and you want to take away the best out of them, you need to simply encourage them and ask them open-ended questions. Okay, so important thing is don't ask leading questions, something like, don't you think that this way is better? Or this is not right, is it? Now, someone from high context culture will most likely always just agree with you, and that's it. You will never be challenged and you will never get anywhere. However, if you can just, encourage the people, knowing that you really value their opinion, you can do it either over the meeting or, privately later, just to the person. Either way, just encourage them and ask very broad, open-ended questions. And this way, you can also get, difficult items or disagreements even from the people who come from these different cultures. Some other tips, repetition or body language, obviously, if you're speaking to people face to face. As for the repetition, now, why is this important? So we've had an experience in the office. I think it was already about 2 years ago. So all of us were given training from our colleagues from India. It was the first time ever we're giving a training by this person. It was about the topic about how to collect certain information correctly. This is someone whom I know very well, but the people were not familiar with. So after maybe half an hour lecture with all of these people, we finished. I just smiled. I saw that everything was nice and clear. I thanked them. I canceled the call. And then I just, turned around to the people and I asked, so everything is good and clear, right? And then I saw that almost everyone behind me was, smirking and having some weird, mysterious expressions on their faces. And then one girl in the corner asked me, so how are we supposed to do this? Because we didn't understand anything. Now, anyone has any idea how is it possible that the guys were not able to understand anything from the presentation? And God help me, there is a chat. There we go. Do we have any guesses? Yep. You were there, it doesn't count, Anastasia. Exactly. So this has nothing to do with specific Indian or I don't know, Nigerian, doesn't matter what accent it is. Just this particular person was speaking extremely, I would say, thick and fast, and in such a way that pretty much almost no one understood him. And this is something I didn't realize because I was already used to the person in a way. So what I took away from this was that after some time, I would be always repeating their questions and I would be always repeating their most important points, just to make sure that everyone can literally understand the person, not just me. So these are just very small things that you can take away. And this is something that may sound not important, but you should always, keep in mind. Let me move to the next one. So there we go. Another one is pretty much, I would like you to think about these different cultural aspects as something that you can take advantage of. So on the one hand, I've already described you all the situations where we're different and we don't understand each other. However, you can always take the best out of everything. Life gives you lemons, you can make a lemonade. You can always assign tasks based on people's strengths, right? I already know that if I need to deliver training, let's say in Philippines, I need to make it in a game way. I will always set up a game, they will arrange prizes, and this is how they will learn the best. While, let's say in Riga, we just want to have it as efficient as possible. So I will make a presentation with questions and we're done. So these are two different approaches to the same item. Also, another thing that most people may not think of at first when it comes to this, but you can leverage these cultural differences as a very good icebreaker when you talk to people. With colleagues that you work every day, and maybe they're all from Latvia or they're all from your country, I know when you are with them, you have all of these, shared intimate topics, even, something that you really share about, and this is what bonds you closer. I know that you don't have this with people that are across borders or you might have never met. However, this gives you a great opportunity to use this, to break the ice. Something even as boring as the weather can turn into something extremely actually interesting. For example, in Philippines, I don't know if you've known, but their average temperature is over 30 degrees. They have very common monsoons, typhoons, cyclones, earthquakes, floods. Many times they have, unfortunately, natural disasters and all of the crazy things because of which they cannot come to work. So, I just ask sometimes very innocent questions and it opens up this, can of items I have never been expected. So thanks to the fact that everyone is different, you can always use this as a really great icebreaker for, any, I would say, uncomfortable situations. And the last point that I've had about the good practices would be, just be curious. This is a very important one. You see, you should never focus only on the negatives. There will always be something that you don't know about the person. Just stay curious and stay positives when it comes to this. I would say the most maybe personal experience I've had with this, and I guess not many people know, was one time I was giving a training to some of our Indian colleagues. I had to get up very early in the morning for this, so obviously I was in a cranky mood because already I had to wake up early. Then the training was about 3 to 4 hours long every day. It was online, virtual, so just keep talking. You barely see their faces. There is little feedback. It sounded annoying. And after having this for a few days, not only that the guys were not really doing their assignments, they also started not turning up for the sessions, or they would take a day off, or they would just take half a day off, and it would be exactly that half a day when we're supposed to have trainings. So obviously it gets to the point when I get somewhat annoyed with them. You may start getting paranoid that they're just not coming because they want to slug the training or something like that. Something like this would not really happen in Latvia. So you start thinking all of these bad thoughts. So at that point, once thankfully, I just talked to one of them. I asked what's going on. Is it the training? Why exactly are you doing this? And then I found out that this particular week, it was the Spring Festival Holi in India, which is this festival of love, colors, and spring. And most people during this time just take the whole week off because they don't want to work at all. They just want to go out, go to the beach. This is actually the picture from the festival. It's extremely joyous time in India. And again, no one wants to work. Everyone is somewhere away with their minds. And after this, I also read a bit about the festival. The guys were sending me later on their pictures from the vacations. It's turned into quite a, I would say, it was a very interesting experience for me. See, so just stay curious, have an open mind. That's very important. Do not focus on the negatives. There will always be something that you do not know about the other person, especially if the person is different to you. It's very, easy just to assume the worst, obviously. There is no shame in admitting that you don't know something. However, it would be a shame to let this prevent you from finding out about the other person. So again, just keep an open mind and stay curious. And I think that's it from me. Thank you. So there we go. In the end, I just have the references that I've used today, mostly to the theory and also to quite an interesting TEDx talk on this topic. If you guys are interested, the guy speaks in a very interesting and an engaging way. So yeah, I'm not sure if I will have way later to share the links with you. But yeah, this is all from me. You guys are, of course, encouraged to ask any questions, or I will just pass it on to the presenters. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Veronika. Thank you very much. So you are working here in Latvia for how long?
This is the 6th year now.
6 years already.
Yeah, quite a while, right?
So you understand the Latvian culture very well.
I like to say so, although I mean you can never fully understand Latvian culture or any culture, but I try.
So how many people are working in your office right now?
We have just reached 100 last year, so by now we have, I believe, like 105 or so. And I think Latvia is actually, I mean, the Latvian nationality is definitely minority in our office.
Wow.
Yeah.
And why did you choose Latvia to work? I mean, not you personally, but I mean,
I firstly came to Latvia just because of my boyfriend, pretty much.
Yeah.
And then since I didn't know the language, it was quite difficult for me to, find a job. And this is how I found the company Faxet, because it was one of the few where they didn't require me to speak Latvian. And pretty much this is how I got in. And I believe that most of my colleagues still don't really even speak Latvian, but this is how they were hired.
You have a couple of questions in the chat, one from Antra and one from Katrina. Do you see them?
Yeah, thank you. I wouldn't have noticed. How many languages do I know? So I speak Slovak, Czech, Russian, German. So I guess that makes it 4.
Good.
Not so many compared to my other colleagues, trust me. What do I like about Latvia the most? It may sound tacky, but I really like the nature. And, it really reminds me of my home, Slovakia. The only thing that you guys are missing are mountains, but Slovakia doesn't have the sea, and here I'm never more than just half an hour drive from the sea, the wind and everything. It's amazing. So I think this is the one thing that I like the most, that it's very close to my home country, but it has some extra small bits also, Okay, how easy or hard was it for me to get used to living in Latvia? So one thing that was quite difficult, I think, for me in the beginning was, and this might have changed already since then, since this was 6 years ago, so I wouldn't know, but going through the whole immigration process, even though I'm from the European Union, it was quite difficult because I didn't speak Latvian, and contrary to what you may think, not everyone at the immigration office speaks English. And as you can imagine, that is quite difficult. At the time, I couldn't understand any Latvian at all. I could only speak Latvian or Russian. And you can imagine that some Latvians do not like if I try to speak to them in Russian rather than in Latvian. So this was one of the challenges I had. So I would often either need to wait for my turn with someone who actually speaks English, or just take my boyfriend just so he can translate for me. This was like a bit of a shock because it was, immigration office after all. So this was maybe one of the hardest part. But what was very easy, other than when it comes to the official things like immigration office and offices, Riga is very international. Almost everyone speaks English. People are really nice and open. And I just really love it here. And I really like living in Riga because of this aspect. So other than, the governmental stuff, it has been actually very easy.
Good. You have a very nice question from Christos, whether cross-generational issues are also as important as cross-cultural issues.
Okay. Just a moment. Would you say the same rules would apply to not only cultural diversity, but also the diversity of a work environment where there are multiple different generations of people?
I can make a comment about that, Veronika.
Yep, go ahead.
I was working for several years with the Center of Creative Leadership in the United States, and they have done quite a lot of research on cross-generational leadership and all aspects around leadership. Actually, they found that the difference between different generations is not as big as difference between different cultures or difference between different professional backgrounds. That could be even bigger. They studied that with focus on the millennial generation, whether the millennials are that different in their motivation and in their values to the next generation, right? So that was a little bit of the research that they have done. Of course, there are differences between different generations, but sometimes I think you can find more difference between people from different cultures than people from different generations of the same culture. But maybe you have other opinions.
I would agree. Of course, everyone else is feel free to also write in the chat. I'll be interested to know. I would agree because, no matter what the generation is, you're still being brought up with the same set of values, So even if probably you may think differently from your, mom or dad, most likely you will see you will find the same thing weird, or you will find the same things accepted, just the items I was using as examples, like, queuing or talking to people, no matter where you're agreeing with your mom or dad, still there is an accepted way of queuing or doing things in your country. So I would agree that the cultural difference is bigger. And since you bring up the generation, I think it's also important not to kind of box people in. So, so for example, just because someone is from India, they can never be direct or efficient. That's not true. So there are many different things that can make people different, right? One is generation, definitely. One that I would also say, someone may not like it, but I would say it's gender. Women do things somewhat differently to men. There are many other things. Even religion can make you, think differently, speak differently. So there are many, many different things. Culture just seems to be the one that also, what I've read and what I feel by research, has been proven to make the most difference. However, I think most of the items also in the presentation refer not only to different cultures, pretty much all of these tips would also apply, even if you meet a Latvian just who is completely different to you. You can still communicate with them better just by being curious, by having an open mind. So I would say this way. I hope this answers at least somewhat.
Good. Do we have any other question or comment before we close?
Looks like no.
Looks like no. Okay, Veronika, thank you so much for being with us today. Okay.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you.
So, and then the video will just stay for the participants so they can see it again. They are supposed to do a slide with the summary. So they will come up with the summary slide.
All right.
Good. Thank you very much, and stay safe during this crisis as well, during the COVID.
Okay. You too. Stay safe, everyone.
Bye. Okay, draugi, ceru, ka jums patika. Ja?
Jā.
Tā kā, un tagad, ko mēs darīsim? Tad mēs gaidīsim
Jūsu pēdējos apkopojumus, un tad jau jūs saņemsiet ziņu no mums e-pastā šīs nedēļas laikā par to, kā jums ir veicies.
Labi, un neaizmirsiet arī mums rakstīt, kā jums patīk, ka taču bija 9 lekcijas kopā, ja?
Jā, man tā šķiet, jā.
Ja? Un es ceru, ka viss atgriezīsies uz normālu realitāti, un mums nebūs atkal vajadzīgs nekādu kursu šajā formātā, bet, tik un tā, es domāju, ka tas bija jāpieredz. Ja?
Jā. Tā kā paldies jums, bija prieks, ka jūs mums pievienojāties, un tad jau tiekamies citos formātos.
Labi, atā!
Tā!